Hey everybody, it's Amanda. I haven't done a video in a while, and there is a topic that came up in another Facebook group that I want to just touch on a little bit because I feel like we should have a discussion every once in a while about service time. And the question that came up in this other group was, what would we recommend for service time for an incoming Braille reader who's a kindergartner? And first I want to say that every single child or student is different, and every unique needs for each unique team is going to be different. So what might be appropriate for one rising kindergarten Braille user, it may not be appropriate for another rising kindergarten Braille user because the teams are going to be different with different people with different backgrounds who need support in different ways. And so as professionals, I caution us to recommend service time to teams and other TVIs for children that we don't even know. We can talk about our own experiences and what worked well for us and what didn't work well for us, but I don't think we should be recommending service time to other providers for them to use for their students. Instead, I think all providers should try to use a more objective way to determine service time. Some other comments I read in this thread were that it didn't really matter what was in the IEP because that's a bare minimum and we can always provide over that. I caution you to not to overserve your students beyond their IEP time, because if you're doing more than what's in the IEP, then the IEP isn't written to provide a free and appropriate public education. If that child needs more, it needs to be documented in the IEP. The reasoning is, if that child moves to another school system and the IEP calls for 3 times 30 minutes a week, but you're really in there 5 times for an hour, the new school system, that new teacher for the blind and vision impaired is not going to know that, and they're going to be underserving that child, and there will be some sort of gap or delay until that child gets the services that are required, or that child might not get those services at all. Another reason is, if you're overserving your child, you are opening up yourself to being in a murky legal area, because a parent could argue that the IEP is not written for free and appropriate public education, or FAPE, and you can end up in some sort of due process situation. Even if you do a good job documenting your hours, you want to make sure the IEP reflects what your student actually needs and that you're only providing what that student actually needs. So one of the things that is a best practice for determining service time is to use a severity scale, and so I'm going to bring up 2 that are available to use onto my screen. They're here. This is the Vision Services Severity Rating Scale, the VSSRS, which was revised in 2017. It is very user-friendly. The document has, directions, and there are YouTube videos out there with ways that you can use it if it's not clear to you. But you just go through by yourself, or I always do it with my team, at least the case manager or classroom teacher, to be more objective, so it's not just me determining my service time. Because the other thing is, I use this tool, or the VISSIT, which is over here. Oh, I didn't pull up the actual VISSIT. This one is with instructions. This is what the VISSIT looks like when you print it out. When you use these tools with another person on your team or your whole team, then what you're recommending is more objective, and it's easier to justify your service time because it's not just something that you're arbitrarily saying. So we shouldn't be out there saying every rising kindergarten student needs 2 hours of Braille instruction a day, because you're going to have the student who picks up Braille really quickly and maybe needs less support, or they don't need direct instruction in Braille so much as they need help using it in the classroom. So you're going to have more push-in services than pull-out services, or you might have a student who, can only focus on 15-minute lessons. So really, we should be making our service time about the student. It's an individualized education program for a reason. We shouldn't have blanket service times for all students. The last comment that I want to make is that when we're proposing service time for children and students, we need to propose what they need and not what we're willing or able to do. So there was a comment about, is that person recommending all the service time willing to go back to a school a second time or a third time during the day? And even though it's inconvenient sometimes, we do have to go back to schools because our students can only handle 15 or 20-minute lessons at a time, but we should not be proposing services based on what we're willing or what we're able to do, because then we are not providing a free and appropriate public education. And I have been blessed to have worked with parents who are wonderful advocates for their children and who have made sure that IEPs are written to make sure we are providing a free and appropriate public education, and we're following that legal document exactly as it's written. And we can't say that the student can only focus for 15 minutes, but we're not willing to go back to a school. And we can't propose that, because if that student does not make progress and someone comes up to question later what's going on, then it's that TVI's fault, really, for the lack of progress because of the unwillingness to return to the school. And we're not doing what we are legally required to do for our students when we're doing that. So service time is a huge soapbox issue for me, because I think it's something that probably teacher prep programs don't talk enough about. And so when we enter the field, we are not always on the same page, but we really have to make sure we're following the federal and state guidelines for how we are providing the service, what we're proposing, and making sure it's really individualized for our student. And again, going back to the VISSIT and the Michigan, we can go through it step by step, determine what the student's needs are, and then they give us a recommended service time. So you'll see here at the end of the VISSIT, you get your numbers, or this is the Michigan, you get your numbers, and it will say 2 or more times a week for 30 to 60 minutes. So it gives you a range, and then after you get your range, you can talk to your team about what's most appropriate. And then here we have the VISSIT. This is for direct service time. It will give you a range based on your number, and it pre-populates if you're doing it online. And then you get to explain why you're not doing that, or why you're doing more, or why you're doing less, and why it doesn't match, why your VISSIT doesn't match your IEP. Or maybe it does match, it doesn't matter. And it has one for indirect service time, so that's your consultation, your training, your support, your push-in services can be in there as well. So there's my soapbox for the day. If you have any questions on how to use either of these tools, let me know, and I can give you some training videos or link you to some training videos so that you can start using them in your practice too. Because like I said, we shouldn't be just arbitrarily picking service time for our kids. Or, the other thing that I sometimes see is that every student gets the same amount per week, same amount in chunks per week for every single student, regardless of the student's needs. And that's just not okay, because it's supposed to be individualized. Hope you have a good day.